So the purpose of the first part of this is to show you in its purest form what these steps look like. The basic idea is that you get out of your mind and into what I call the space. What is the space? It's got many definitions. Every religion has its own definition of the space. Hashem, you could call it God. You could just call it a space beneath the activity of the conscious mind. Maybe it's the superconscious mind. Whatever term you have for it, everybody agrees it exists. And we've all fallen into that space, usually by accident. Maybe when a breeze comes, or watching leaves turn, or reading a paper, or playing, and for a moment you fall into that space and you're playing great. And then the mind says, wow, I'm really playing great, and you're out of the space. So there's a comedy to that, but there's also a tragedy to that. Because sometime you're playing on a gig that totally doesn't matter, and you're relaxed, or you're playing with friends, and you're playing your derriere off, and you say, now, Saturday night I've got a gig that really counts. I want to show them how free I am. You go to that gig expecting this space to descend on you again, and it doesn't. Instead, you're disappointed because you had the expectation of being free, and you're more bound than ever. This whole idea starts with a basic premise. When I do a clinic, I say, think about a time that you really needed to play well. How'd you play? In your mind, it was very important that you played well. How'd you play? And then think about a time when it didn't matter at all. In your mind, nothing important was going on. Maybe you were playing a gig that nobody was listening, or you were playing with friends, or you had a beer and you loosened up. The attraction of drugs and alcohol has been that simple fact that you anesthetize the conscious mind and get into a space that's more connected. That's the idea anyway. Most people fall in the abyss before they achieve that. But that's the point. Now think about a gig that you didn't care about at all and you were just fooling around. How'd you play then? Most people will answer that when they so wanted to play well, they didn't play very well at all. And when they didn't care, they played better. And I say, well, that's great. Now we've already learned the most important thing of this lesson. Now that you know that caring a lot leads to not playing well, you'll never care again, right? At this point, people usually laugh. Because even though they just proved by their own experience that caring a lot and hoping that you play a great gig and thinking it's an important gig leads to sabotaging the gig, they still won't be able to do it. They'll go to play and this thing will come on them automatically, this urge to do well, which doesn't lead to doing well. And the reason for that is that the mind is a programmable organ. Whatever it's been in the habit of doing, it creates a groove, like water going through the path of least resistance. So that's why so many things you've said, I don't want to do this anymore, or I'd like to do that, and you still don't do it, or you still do it. Why? Why don't you do what you've acknowledged is most important to do? Or why don't you stop doing what you've acknowledged was so damaging to your life? Because the mind forms grooves, and it's hard to break those grooves. I'm not going to get into psychology, nor am I a psychiatrist, but you have to form new habits. And I'm not any better than anybody else at that, except at my instrument, which is why I talk about music and not, say, dieting or drug, sobriety or something. I'm no expert, but I have experienced students changing their attitude and therefore their relationship to the instrument. What you have to do is create a new habit. For example, being in the space is not like being in your conscious mind. Being in your conscious mind, that's where all the fears are, that's where all the complications are, that's where the what-ifs are. All those things are the reasons that's the piano's out of tune. It bothers you. That's the conscious mind. You're not getting paid enough. That's the conscious mind. Now, you should be uncomfortable about that. However, it shouldn't be there when you're playing. Playing in itself should drop you into what I call the space. What is that? That is that spirit place or spiritual place that, like I said, everybody around the world has a name for it. When you fall into it, you feel connected to everything around you. You feel a cosmic connection. You feel love. You feel You don't feel individuality as much as you feel connection. You don't feel threatened so much. A lot of good things from there. From the space, music and the instruments sound amazing. From the conscious mind, sometimes nothing you play is enough. From the space, one note can be so satisfying. So the question is, how do you get into the space?